All right. Welcome to our weekly lecture. Um, Thank you for tuning in. So I just kind of want to go over what we're doing this week really quickly, and then what's coming up. Um, so we're just kind of plodding along, and hopefully you're kind of in a rhythm, right? Because we kind of do the same thing every week. Material changes, but the actual mechanical part of doing it should be very similar. All right. And so the goal is to finish your study guide. Excuse me, finish your study guide in preparation for the first exam. So you will have to turn in the study guide for points. But as you see, in the lectures, I actually, fill that in for you, and you just have to kind of, copy that or however you do that. And then I just want to remind people not to forget about the bones. Okay. Now, you guys are the first group, and I decided not to make the practice quizzes or the little weekly quizzes. I didn't make them like required, or and that might be a disservice to you because I'm noticing that not everybody's taking the practice bone quizzes. And if it was worth points, people would take it and then they would be better prepared for the bone exam. And so I'm a little worried about that. Um, Now, this is the second week of bones. So we had bones here. This was our first list, even though it says week two, but it's our first list of bones. But don't forget that in the ungraded lecture resources, there is the practice bone quiz on those particular bones. And if you do it weekly, like just include it in your weekly activities, then when it comes time for the bone exam, it's not going to be as scary. All right, because it's a little every week. So I'm thinking, I don't know what to do, if I should make it worth points. I feel like I can't really do that, um, midstream and just all of a sudden make them required. Um, but to just remind people not to forget this, at least take it once. But remember, the more you take it, the more questions you're going to see. And to just not forget that, because you don't want to be cramming at the end, right? Taking all of them over and over and over again. So if you just take it a couple times during the week, then it will really be helpful. And so today, this week, I mean, we have a new bone list. I just want to take a peek at it. So there's more bones here. Okay, so we have the humerus, the ulna, the radius, the wrist, and the hand. So there's quite a few more bones and features that you have to know. And so this is really a week that you want to do that. Either catch up, so start last week with the clavicle and the scapula, and work on that. So take those quizzes a couple times, and then to work on the bones here. So I'm thinking in the future for the next class to maybe make it more, make it required. Okay. But so pretend it's required. And I mean, we could make it like extra credit or something. Would that make people do it more? Or because some people just, if it's extra credit, they don't do it anyway. So um, I don't know. Maybe give some feedback on that. And what do you think? Because I don't know, Alicia, if you've been doing that, keeping up with the bone list, but there's actually only a handful of people who have been doing that, taking the practice quizzes. So remember, the practice quizzes are found in the ungraded resources. So to do that. Okay. Anyway, if you have thoughts, just shoot me a message or something. I did include I think in week 5 a self-assessment. And I haven't made it, visible yet, but after you take your exam, um, to do a self-assessment here, and maybe that might be a place that you can make suggestions and things like that. Um, okay, and then, everything is preparing us for the exam next week. Okay, it will be open next week. You notice we don't have extra or new material. So, and then we still have a bone list. The list is very short and only one topic, one it's the pelvis, but there's only a handful of questions on it. So, to not forget to click on that and or to, study it a little bit and then take the quiz, okay, the practice quiz. All right, so that's next week. And to prepare for it, obviously you're filling out the study guide, right? And listening to the lectures and filling out the study guide. And then you use that study guide to study from, because when I make my exam, I take questions, out of the study guide. But as you're taking the quizzes here, right? For each one, there's a chapter quiz. And I mentioned the more you take it, the more questions you see that are possible on the exam. But some of them have, I don't know, 20, 30 questions in a question bank. So it would take you a lot of times to see those all the questions, right? Because sometimes you'll get repeats and things like that because it's random. So I would highly suggest you visit the tutor. Now, the tutor had office hours last week on Wednesday night and Saturday morning. No one visited her. And she actually has been working on streamlining the first exam for you. Okay. So I'm going to let you know that you could take these practice quizzes over and over and over again, and you'd see more and more questions each time. But she's going to actually go in and um, kind of streamline those questions. Okay, she's taken a bunch of questions and is just going to practice with you. So instead of having to take it a whole bunch of times and get a lot of repeats, she's going to not give you repeats. All right. So I just want to stress how going to the tutoring is going to be really helpful. Now, she did send a message that she won't be having her tutoring on Wednesday. All right. So she's actually traveling, and but she will have it on Saturday morning. I think it's at 9, I think. But anyway, to definitely tune in, especially because your first exam is next week. And so that would be the perfect little, I don't know, it will just be a great use of your time. All right. Instead of, again, taking these quizzes over and over. And, now we're going to have 5 quizzes and you take them all multiple times, right? She's going to just kind of streamline that. She has access to some of those questions. So she's going to really make it worth your time. All right. So be sure to do that. Visit the tutor on Saturday. Okay. Again, there's no tutoring on Wednesday night. Okay. Do you have any questions? Any questions?
I understand now.
What was that? No questions?
No questions, not at this time. I didn't know that the practice quiz was located there, so now that it's there, I'm definitely will utilize it. Um,
Okay,
so yeah,
good.
that was probably
Good. So, yeah, so because, people see ungraded, so maybe they might not even go there. And maybe I'll click on there and just let's look at what's there every week. Um, I have the lectures. These are the actual lectures without the questions. And I have a student who watches them first before doing the regular lecture, because the regular lecture has embedded questions in it, right? So she likes to go through this and get her study guide all nice and done
I
without the
do this.
interruption.
I do the same as well, only because it's harder to magnify and zoom in and maybe kind of see the study guides at times when I do the lecture version. So
Oh,
when I do the one that, doesn't have the questions, I can kind of see it and zoom in a little better, and adjust my screen as needed. Just a
wow,
little
I
thing.
didn't know that. Okay, that makes me happy that I put them because I'm like, should I put them here? Just the actual lectures, but that's awesome. Okay, and I think that's a really good way to do it, just to kind of uninterrupted watch the video and fill out your study guide. And because yeah, once it's in, I had to lock it into a program that will allow me to embed the questions. So I didn't realize that you can't um, alter it or use it in other ways and magnify and stuff like that. Okay, perfect. We have the images here. Okay, so you can lift them and put them in your study guide to make it beautiful. And then here's that practice. And then of course, this Zoom recording is going to be posted here in this link here. We'll make it hot later. Okay. So there's some good resources there. And again, the tutoring is in the welcome module. Here's the tutor schedule. And then you just click on the link. It's a Zoom. So even if you're like driving or doing something else, you can still zoom in and listen or while you're doing other things. It's really worth your while. And if no one uses it, well, we don't get funding, number one, for it if no one goes. And also she may change her hours and cancel one of those two if no one's coming. And then the other class she's tutoring, she has a lot more students who attends. There's like 5 to 10 students in every one of her sessions. So she may add another session to another class. So anyway, if it's not used, it will go away. So just want to encourage you again. She's going to make it worth your while. It's not like wasted time. She's also preparing things for the bones, right? So she'll go over the bones with you. So if you haven't had time to like watch all the videos, she's going to go over the bone and then quiz you. She's made these wonderful presentations where she's going to go over the bone features and then quiz you on it, and you do it together. And so it's just it'll be really worth your time to go. Okay. Um, and that's why I tell my tutors, don't waste students' time. Okay, don't waste their time. So she's been working and preparing stuff for you guys. So she was a little sad last week, but go on Saturday in preparation for the exam. But if you go every week, all right, it's just like you could sit and study on your own, or you could just go to the tutor and study with her because she'll quiz you. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, great. I'll let her know that someone's going to show up on Saturday. She'll get all happy. All righty. Thank you. But yeah, even if it's just you, it's private tutoring. The college pays for it. If you had to pay for a private tutor, that would be so much money. And we provide our own personal tutors, right? So we choose them and that make sure they have the background. And they're class specific, right? So it's not just a biology tutor. It's a tutor for this class. All right. And so she goes into the material, she looks to see what is happening and what you have to know, and then she'll prepare for that. So anyway, thank you, thank you, thank you. And anybody else who will attend. So let's go ahead and I want to go to our thing here. Okay. Um, and so I did post this here, no Wednesday tutoring. That's in that's tomorrow, no tutoring tomorrow. Um, let's see, and she also won't be tutoring on the Saturday after. So she'll tutor this Saturday, but not the Saturday after. She's going to be traveling again. So she's traveling exactly on the times that she was tutoring. It happened after. So anyway, today we're going to chapters 4 and 5. Were there any questions about chapter 3? We didn't get through it all. We got through some difficult concepts. There's more other concepts. So maybe I'll put this here, chapter 3, and I want to shout out to Dan in our class. So Dan sent me a message in how to make it so you could see the colors. So I'm going to say, thank you. Thank you, Dan. All right. So he actually looked up um, how to make colors to be able to distinguish colors, and he looked up the particular um, document camera, and he sent me a link, a YouTube video. But anyway, amazing. So now you can see that's red, that's blue, that's black, and this is green. Anyway, so chapter 3, just at the end of the chapter, the last couple questions, it deals with something called gene expression. And the process of gene expression. And I want to kind of take some of the mystery out of that. Because, but it's so important in the functioning of our body that I want to be sure that you understand. So you may know that genes are located in our DNA. So if we have, DNA here, I'm going to draw it right, our helix. Okay, so let's say that's our DNA. Well, a gene is just like a piece of DNA. Like that part of the DNA is a gene. So it's a piece of DNA. And what does that gene do? That gene is going to have instructions for the making of a protein. All right. And so that gene, we're going to have to figure out how to get to a particular protein. So, for example, if you're working out, okay, you decide to go and start lifting weights, okay, then your muscles get bigger. Well, what is happening? Okay, you are stimulating the gene for muscle proteins. Okay? So you stimulate that particular gene, and then it goes through processes to make that muscle protein. And that's what gets you bigger. Okay. So gene expression is this process, and it involves several steps. The first step is transcription. So transcription is going from the DNA, and I'll say the information in DNA, but what that means is, what are the nucleotides, what are the order of the bases, right? Thymine, adenine, guanine, cytosine. Is it thymine, adenine, guanine, right? Is that the order of the bases, or is it adenine, cytosine, guanine? So the order of the bases will determine, that's the information in the DNA. Okay, which base is in which order, right? And we take that information, and in fact, the DNA unwinds. So we have that. So let's say we have that gene, and it actually unwinds in that one place. Okay, so here is this DNA, here's the gene, and it unwinds for us. All right. And what we do is we make a an RNA. So we copy the code here, all right, just the order of the nucleotides or the bases, and we make a little message. So we make a single strand RNA, and we call it a messenger RNA. But can you see how we unwound that gene and we made a little copy of an RNA molecule now, but we call it a messenger RNA. And it's this message that's going to leave the nucleus. So let's say, right, the DNA is in the nucleus. So this happens in the nucleus. We make our little RNA, and that little RNA is going to travel out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm of the cell. All right, so this is the nucleus. And so this process is transcription. This process of making a messenger RNA from the gene that we want to copy from the DNA. All right, so this is transcription, that process. So this little message then goes into the cytoplasm and it goes to the ribosome. So we have a ribosome here. And a ribosome, remember, is rRNA, ribosomal RNA. So it's all nucleotides. These are nucleotides. Okay, and the message is going to be read there. Now, there's one other component that is the transfer RNA. So a tRNA is also an RNA, and it is attached to an amino acid. So maybe I'm going to make an amino acid. All right, so each transfer RNA has a particular amino acid. So let's say this particular transfer RNA has an amino acid number 5 on it. And this transfer RNA has an amino acid number 10, right? So there's different amino acids that are used in living things, and they're just, floating around. All right. But each transfer RNA has a particular amino acid attached to it. And so what happens is this transfer RNA, because it is also made out of nucleotides and it has nitrogen containing bases, right? So there's adenine, uracil instead of thymine, and then it has the cytosine and guanine. So it has a particular order of nucleotides. If it matches here, if it matches the messenger RNA, right? Because it's the messenger RNA has a code, the order of the bases, that will determine which transfer RNA to come, all right, and attach, right? So if the code is different, maybe this one matches it, and it will bring its amino acid with it and drop off the amino acid. So the amino acid is dropped off. Then the next one is going to come and it's going to drop off its amino acid 10, etc. And so what we do is we start building the beginnings of a protein, right? So this is called translation. And I want you to note the name. To translate something is to change the language. And so here we're actually changing the language from the language of nucleotides and bases to the language of amino acids. Okay. And so by bringing the particular transfer RNAs that match the message, we have a strand of amino acids being built. And then, it'll undergo changes to form the protein. And from those, we get the protein. All right. So gene expression. And so we are expressing the gene in the form of a protein. All right. So I just want you here to kind of stand back and not look at details. But what are we trying to do? We're taking a gene in the form of nucleotides, that's the language, is nucleotides, and we're making a protein, which is a language of amino acids. So how does that happen? And it does it in these two steps, transcription and translation. Okay. So remember that transcription, if we look at that term, if you transcribe something, you don't change the language, right? You change maybe the delivery method. So if someone in a court of law is transcribing the proceedings, right? What they're doing is they're taking an oral, what's happening orally, right? In the courtroom, people are talking, the lawyers are talking, and that person is typing and changing it from oral language into a written. But the language is the same, right? They're not making it, from English to Japanese or something like that, right? From English and keeping it in English, but it's just changing the way it's delivered. So same here, transcription, we don't change the language. The language is still nucleotides, but we went from a double-stranded nucleotides to a single strand. We went from DNA to RNA and didn't change the language, but we changed the delivery, right? So now it's a single strand. Did that make sense? If you just kind of step back and look at the overview of it, um, and then what is our goal here? And it takes these two processes to make that protein. Okay, awesome. And then the last thing in that chapter was pretty gnarly, I think, was mitosis. Okay, so I just want to touch on that and why that's important. Mitosis. So mitosis is division of the nucleus, the cell nucleus. I'm going to just abbreviate for speed. So we divide the nucleus, resulting in two nuclei that is identical to the original. We're making a clone pretty much. All right. And so this is just the nucleus. That's the DNA part of it. The other part is cytokinesis. Cytokinesis is then division of the rest of the cell, the cytoplasm. Okay, so cell division is made up of two steps, dividing the nucleus and dividing the cytoplasm, which is everything else, right? And so why is this important? Okay, I want you to see that, we begin as a single cell, right? So this is an egg and this is a sperm. So the sperm has 23 chromosomes, right? The egg has 23 chromosomes. So they come from the mom and the dad, right? So the mom has 23 chromosomes and the dad has 23 chromosomes. Okay. Now it could be like chromosome number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So there's going to be 23. Well, the 23 over here are going to match. Okay, the one in the egg is going to have a chromosome number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, etc. So they actually match each other. So when they come together in fertilization, we get a zygote, which is a fertilized egg. And we join these two. So now we have a chromosome from dad, we have a chromosome number 2. This is chromosome number 1. This is chromosome number 2. Okay. And we end up with 23 pairs. Okay. Right. So I want you to just understand that these are the chromosomes, the DNA, but it comes in little segments called chromosomes. And then, so this is 23, 23, we get 46 chromosomes total, or 23 pairs. And I want to stress that it's actually matching pairs, half donated by mom and half donated by dad. All right, so how do we get from here to us here? Okay. What happens to this one cell? Because we all start as one cell, which is kind of crazy, right? That we're here writing and talking and seeing and hearing, right? This single cell is going to have to divide, all right? So the zygote is going to divide, and those cells are going to divide, and it's going to go over and over and over and over until we get an organism, right? And then the cells are going to specialize or, you know, change, right, to become, you know, particular tissues and things like that. All right, but I want to stress that your single cell has 46 chromosomes, but what do you know? Every time you divide, that 46 chromosome number is maintained. And we do that because of mitosis. Because if this didn't happen, what would happen over time? You know, if we took the chromosomes and cut it in half every time, you know, then we'd have two cells with 23 chromosomes, then four cells with half of that, and half again, and half again. And eventually, the cells will have hardly any chromosomes or DNA in it. Okay. So there has to be a process of number one, making a copy of your DNA, and then dividing that DNA up so that each cell will get a whole copy of it. Okay, one of each of the chromosomes or two of each of the chromosomes. So pay attention, you know, as you do that, and or you watch the video, right? Maybe go back. Now, why is this important? Okay, sure, to make us, but how is it important now? Okay, if you cut yourself, all right, if you cut yourself, oh, magically it heals and it fills in, right? What is that? That's mitosis and cytokinesis. You have to make more cells. You know, every day, you know, you scratch your skin, it's being sloughed off. You're replacing your skin, which we'll talk about next, and from below. So mitosis continuously happens as you're regenerating your skin, other parts of your body. Although there are some cells that lose the ability to undergo mitosis and cytokinesis. And so that would be like nervous tissue, like your brain, your cells of your spinal cord, right? They've lost the ability to undergo mitosis. So the question is like, why is that? How do we make these cells have the ability to regenerate and undergo mitosis? All right. But you have to understand what is mitosis first to be able to think beyond that. And so you know, some cells stop doing mitosis. Well, what happens when cells lose control over mitosis? What if they're undergoing mitosis over and over and over again and cytokinesis along with it? Okay, what do we have then? Then we have cancer. Okay, cancer is your own cells that have lost control of mitosis, that continue to divide and divide and divide. But as it divides, and if it divides too quickly like that, the divisions are not complete, or they're you know, the cells aren't useful. Okay, they just start crowding out normal tissue and pressing on nerves and vessels and take up space. Okay, and then you know what, one or two cells get loose, they metastasize or travel and lodge someplace else, and they continue to undergo mitosis and cytokinesis. So this topic is actually really important because now, you know, you can take drugs, chemotherapy, right? How does it work? Well, it's got to uh, you know, find those cells that are rapidly dividing and kill them. right? And that's why, some chemotherapy, people lose their hair because in their hair follicles, or, in their hair, it's rapidly dividing. So it only can like find rapidly dividing cells, but you have normal cells that are rapidly dividing in your intestines too. That's why you have, problems with nausea and diarrhea and things like that. So how can you create a drug that can specifically attack that cancerous cell and make mitosis stop? Okay. So, again, understanding the process of mitosis, and then you can go and, devise drugs or treatments or things like that if you understand. Okay. Um, so that is mitosis. And again, I didn't talk about the individual parts to it. There's stages or phases of mitosis. So you have to understand that too, the mechanics of it. I was just, stepping back and why is it important? All right. I do want to go to, so chapter 4 is tissues. It's very straightforward. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. The different types of tissue, epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, nervous tissue. So all tissues can be found in one of those 4 categories. Because sometimes I ask students, how many tissues do you think we have in the body? People say, well, like 10, 20, 100, right? No, it's 4. Okay. So, as you're going through the chapter, it's like I said, it's very straightforward. But learning about how to distinguish the different types of tissue and what makes it an epithelial tissue, what makes connective tissue. Connective tissues, there's a lot of diversity in that one. Like blood is connective tissue, and tendons and ligaments are connective tissue. So go ahead and go through that lecture, and it's just interesting. Lots of things in there. But it's what makes up our body. So again, how do we distinguish between them, and then devise treatments for different illnesses and diseases that affect these different tissues, right? All right, I just want to spend the remaining time in the integumentary system. So the integumentary system is not just the skin. So this is chapter 5. Okay. The integumentary system, yes, includes the skin. So the skin is part of it. But because it's a system, it has other things. So we have skin plus the fat under the skin, that is called hypodermis, plus what we call accessory structures. So the things that are kind of embedded in the skin. So this can be like hair and nails, right? They're not part of the skin, but they're found in the skin and are, derived from the skin. Um, Hypodermis is what's under it, and skin. So the skin is actually made up of 2 parts, the epidermis and the dermis. All right. So if you go to see a skin doctor, what is a skin doctor called? He's a dermatologist. Okay. So the term derm in Latin or Greek means skin. So that's why this is called the dermis. So epidermis, from our terminology, medical terminology, epi means above or on top of. So we know automatically where this is located. There's 2 layers to the skin. There's the dermis and a layer that sits on top of the dermis, the epidermis. Okay? The epidermis is what we encounter, here. This is the outside world. The hypodermis, hypo means less than or under, right? So hypodermis is under the skin. Okay. All right. So I'm going to draw. So I hope you take, you have a piece of paper and you also draw, because it's real important as you're watching the lectures that you actually, if I draw something, draw it. Draw it. There's something that happens when you draw. I don't know how it works in the brain, but it solidifies there versus just looking at it. So let's start with the epidermis. So the epidermis is actually made up of 5 layers. Okay. Okay. All right. Actually, let me do that again. I don't like that. Okay, let me do a better picture. Sorry. I say draw it, but maybe wait till I do a better job. Okay, I made my wavy line too early. So this is the skin, and we have the epidermis. Or maybe wavy line down here. Okay. Oh, I haven't drawn this for a little bit. Okay, the 5 layers of the epidermis. So all this is epidermis. Okay, I'm going to call them stratum. And maybe so stratum is a layer. Oh, look at the color. Thanks, Dan, again. Stratum corneum is the most superficial layer. We have stratum lucidum, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, and stratum, I'm going to put it over here because I'm going to draw it over there. Well, stratum basale. Okay, so those are the 5 layers of the epidermis. Now I'm going to write a little bit about each layer or some of the layers. Some kind of interesting thing. Stratum corneum is made up of stratified squamous epithelium. All right. And you'll learn in your chapter 4 lecture that stratified squamous is many layers of flat cells. So there's a whole bunch of flat cells in here. Okay, when I make these layers, they're filled with cells. And these are flat cells in here. Stratum lucidum, it's a clear layer. Okay, so if you have a lucid thought, it's a clear thought. So, but this one, I'm going to say clear, and it is missing in thin skin. So there are areas in our body where the skin is thinner, like on our face. Whereas in areas like our feet or palms have thicker skin. And so in areas where it's thin, we don't have a stratum lucidum. Okay. Stratum granulosum, it is where cells begin to die. They begin to die. And the cells get filled with keratin. Keratin is a protein, a waxy protein. And so as cells begin to die, they lose their nuclei. And because they're just being filled with this waxy protein, and it makes it kind of waterproof. Spinosum is the spiny layer. When they didn't know how to prepare skin for viewing, um, it would always make the cells kind of shrivel and they would look like little stars in there that look like spiny. But now they prepare it properly, but it was named for what it looked like before. And then this is the basal layer or the base. Okay, that might help you to remember. Now, the stratum basale made up of cells, and it's these cells down here that undergo mitosis. Okay, so mitosis here. And so as these cells divide, it moves upward like this. The cells move upward and push the upper layers up. And so the cells move up, 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 and then they die here and they start getting flattened as they move up. So, what does this mean? So if you get let's say a tattoo, but you don't want, your mom to see it when you come home in the summer or something like that, you can get ink put down here in the lower parts of the epidermis because eventually it will be sloughed off as it moves its way up. It takes maybe a month or two for your skin kind of to be replaced, and then it's sloughed off. Okay, if you put the ink deep to the epidermis, it's permanent. Okay, because mitosis is not occurring down here, it occurs here and moves things upward. All right. In addition, there are specialized cells found in the basale. So there's some cells here that have these like projections like this. These cells are called melanocytes. Why? Because they make melanin to make our skin darker. So melanin is a pigment. Okay, so the melanocytes make melanin and they actually spread the melanin around to other cells through these little projections. Um, Anybody ever notice how is it that you can change the color of your skin? We're like chameleons, right? So I go out in the sun and my skin gets dark. Do you ever think about that? Isn't that kind of amazing? I think it's amazing. The melanocytes are stimulated to make more melanin. And the melanin will actually like surround the nuclei in different cells. So it can be transported to, up to, oh, I don't know how many cells, 20 cells, 30 cells, and distribute the melanin around the DNA. And what it does, because it's darkly pigmented, it it absorbs the UV light. Okay? So absorbing of the UV light, and it kind of takes the hit for the DNA from the sun. So it's a protective thing. All right. And then, my skin is sloughed off, and then I go back to my normal pigment tone. And so people with darker skin just make more melanin. Okay, we all have about the same melanocytes, but it's how much melanin we make, and that's genetically determined, right? But melanocytes can become cancerous, right? Lose control of mitosis. So when that happens, we can get a skin cancer called melanoma. Okay, so they can become cancerous, and this is a pretty deadly type of cancer because a lot of times it's not discovered. Right? So let's say you have a different type of skin cancer called basal cell carcinoma. Basal cell, oh, it's in the basale, but it's these other cells. These cells are called keratinocytes. So the regular cells are called keratinocytes. There's cells that make keratin. Okay, and they're going to eventually make their way up and then start producing keratin up here. That's why it's granulosum, because keratin starts being produced and it's like grainy. It appears like little granules. That's why. All right, so that's the epidermis. Let's take a look at the dermis. So the dermis is deep, two layers of the dermis. Okay. Um, there is what we call the papillary layer. And the reticular layer. Okay. Made of different things. Papillary is made up of areolar connective tissue, and reticular is dense. It's not reticular connective tissue, you would think, but it's called dense irregular connective tissue, right? So you're going to learn the different types of connective tissue this week in chapter 4. All right, these are the types and where they're found. All right, so we have this kind of set up all around the body where we have the epidermis, not the epidermis, but the epithelium on the outside, and then the connective tissue below that connects the layer on the outside to the underlying structures. All right, so that is the skin, epidermis and dermis. And remember, there's the layer under the skin called the hypodermis. The hypodermis is under the skin, also called the subcutaneous layer, right? Subcutaneous is under the skin. This is made up of adipose tissue, adipose connective tissue, which is fat. All right, so under the skin is fat. You look at like other animals, right? Chickens or whatever, you take the skin and there's fat underneath it. So that's the hypodermis, just fat. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Oh, a couple other things. Blood vessels, nerves are located in the dermis. In case I asked that. Oh yeah, and then this is wavy. Okay, that's how we can kind of quickly see in the sample of skin where the epidermis and dermis is. So there's these parts that extend upward here. This is called a dermal papilla. Papilla means nipple. All right, so a dermal papilla extends upward, like fingers upward. And then downward, we have epidermal ridges. All right, so from the epidermal side, we have projections that come down. And from the dermis side, we have the dermal papilla that comes up. And they do this, and it helps to hold together the epidermis and the dermis, right? So we have projections coming down, we have projections coming up, and they interdigitate like this and keep them from coming apart. So what happens when they do come apart? So let's say you bought a brand new pair of hiking boots right before you decided to go on a 20-mile hike. Okay. Don't do that, because what happens is your feet aren't used to it, and there are going to be places that rub, okay, that are going to be rubbing on the skin over and over and over again. And eventually those layers can come apart. That's how we get blisters. Okay, and sometimes it's filled with fluid, sometimes it's air, sometimes it's blood if you happen to hit a blood vessel, right? And we can separate that with that kind of forces. Okay, so you want to buy your hiking boots way in advance and work them in so your feet are used to them. Okay. All right, and let's see, what else is it? Oh, fingerprints, right? The ridges here, create fingerprints because we can see the ridges, in our tips of our fingers. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? And then, we also talk about hair and nails. So that's part of this lecture here. But, this lecture here isn't meant to give you everything, right? It's to just kind of talk about those things either that you're going to see in the exam more, or just maybe some more difficult concepts. So, all right. Any questions? Well, I think if you didn't come, I don't know what I'd do. If I'd probably talk a little bit and make a small recording, but not do a big thing. So thanks for coming. And the
Thank you.
rest of you, join us. Do you have
Thank you
questions?
so much. No, I'm just gonna get ready for this week, go back and kind of study the things that we recovered are covered from this week, from last week chapters. And
Okay. Okay,
and then I'm
perfect.
gonna thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for coming in. Yeah, go see the tutor on Saturday. You'll be happy. And all of
Yes,
you,
I will.
go see tutors. Okay. All right. Thanks for coming.